All right, everybody, what is going on? And welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk. This is a show we cover the SWAC inside and out. I'm your tour guide around the SWAC Sea Wells, coming at you, man. And we are back from a little small break that was not intentional, man. You know, life been crazy, work been crazy, so had to kind of regroup and recharge. But now we back, man, and we're gonna recap the two spring games that take place today. We're gonna recap them tomorrow. And so today I just wanted to drop a video and talk a little SWAC football. We're gonna take a look at the week by week schedule for the 2024 season. I'm calling this my first look. It's not my official first look because I already obviously looked at all these schedules before, but this is gonna be my first look, and I'm gonna rank these weeks 1 to 10 on my watchability scale. One is top tier, and I mean 10 is top tier. One is like trash. So we're gonna rank each week 1 to 10. My thoughts, and I'm gonna kind of talk about the games that should be games to watch on each week. Obviously, a lot can change between the day and the start of the season. Hell, a lot can change between week to week during the season. So this is just a first look. You know, we're gonna dissect and redissect this multiple times over the course of the summer and into the fall. So just wanted to put my first thoughts out here on the schedule and what week I think might be the best week to watch if you're not at a game or whatever. So with all that said, man, y'all make sure y'all check out those socials. Facebook is Swag Talk, Twitter Swag Talk 76, Instagram Swag Talk. Also, I have an article dropping on Busting Brackets probably be next week, early next week. So y'all keep it locked to my socials. You'll get a link there to check it out. It's gonna be on the transfer portal. So y'all keep that locked up, and we're gonna have a lot more stuff still dropping on that site. Even though basketball season is over, there's still transfer portal, recruiting, and all other things that come to my mind. So we're gonna still have things there for you to check out while we talk football here mostly. Um, don't forget to subscribe to the channel while you're here. Like the video, comment, and feel free to share this video out to all your peeps. So let's go ahead and get started, man. Like I said, we're gonna do this on a scale of 1 to 10, week by week. Um, 1 is absolute trash. Week 10 is top tier. Probably won't have any weeks that hit those rankings, but that's how we're gonna do this. So we're gonna start off with Saturday, August 24th. That is the MEAC SWAC Challenge between Norfolk State and Florida A&M. Obviously, that game is on ABC, 7:30 Eastern. Um, Obviously, this is the only game of the day. So it's the first game, week 0. I guess you can call this a 10 on the watchability scale for the fact that it is the only game, and it's the first game of the season. So obviously, if you're not there, you're gonna want to tune into this game, regardless of how these two teams are coming into this game. You want to watch it because it's the first game of the season for anybody. So this is the first live action of football after months of hype and talk and all of that. So I guess I said I probably wouldn't have a 10, but this is a 10 on that scale. The game itself, if this was like a week 3 or 4 game, who knows? This would probably still be a 7 or 8. But just for the fact that this is week 0, only game, prime time, ABC, you know, you get to watch football after months of no football. So that gives it a 10. Week 1 starts on Thursday, August 29th. There are 3 games that day, that evening, I guess you could say. Alcorn is at UAB, Jackson State is at ULM, and Pine Bluff is at Arkansas. Um, Obviously, I'm going to update this as the TV schedule comes out. So we'll talk more TV and times and things later in the season. But those 3 games are just FBS games. They don't really have a lot of intrigue to them. Saturday's games are August 31st. You have Southern at McNeese, Grambling at ULL, Bethune-Cookman at USF, South Carolina State at Florida A&M, Valley at Tennessee State, Alabama A&M at Auburn, and the Labor Day Classic, Texas Southern and Prairie View. So we have 4 FCS games, 1 SWAC matchup on Saturday, and a couple FBS games. So again, pretty decent mix. No sub D1 games at all this week. And then we close the week out with Alabama State and North Carolina Central in Miami at the Orange Blossom Classic, Sunday, September 1st. So I would give this, since this is the first week for everybody, I would give this like a I will give it like a 7. Primarily because there are multiple FBS games. There's like there's 5 FBS games that week, so it kind of takes a little bit of the luster off. But this is week 1, and that's kind of what you get. But the fact that there are no sub D1 games on this week makes for a good week. There's multiple non-conference matchups with FCS opponents. There are games against 3 games that week against HBCU FCS opponents, and then Southland opponent in the non-conference. So that's a pretty good mix to offset those FBS games. So not a bad week 1. Would love to see less FBS games, but it is what it is. Moving on to week 2, Saturday, September 7th. Florida A&M is at Miami. Prairie View is at Northwestern State. Valley is at Lamar. Alcorn is at Vanderbilt. Mercer is at Bethune-Cookman. Texas Southern is at Rice. Kentucky State is at Alabama A&M. Savannah State is at Southern. Tuskegee is at Grambling. Lane is at Jackson State. Miles is at Bama State. And Arkansas Baptist is at Pine Bluff. Oh man, this week is not. If you're looking for an interesting game this week, there's not many. I guess if you had to choose, I would, because it's the only FCS versus FCS matchup would be Mercer and Bethune-Cookman, just because our Prairie View and Northwestern State, those are the only 2 FCS, well, and Valley and Lamar. I keep forgetting Valley all the time. So there are 3 FCS matchups. You can probably take your pick out of the 3 to have as your game, interesting game that day. There's 3 FBS games on that day, and then there are 6 sub D1 games this week. So not a lot of intrigue there. Grambling and Tuskegee for the historical relevancy are 2 great historically black teams over history, but in terms of an actual game in 2024, not really moving the needle that much. This is a 5-week, man. I could go lower, but it's still early in the season, so the intrigue of seeing teams play, is still kind of high, but not a great week for a week 2. So many non-Division 1 games all in the same week. Just not a good week to me. Week 2 is kind of lackluster. Coming off of a pretty strong week 0 and week 2. Week 0 and week 1, you get a kind of lackluster week 2. Kind of disappointing, but we move on to week 3, which is September 14th. Pine Bluff plays Tennessee State in the Southern Heritage Classic. Valley is at Murray State. Bethune-Cookman at Western Michigan. Fayetteville State at Alabama A&M. Grambling at Texas A&M Commerce. Southern at Jackson State. Prairie View at Michigan State. Edward Waters at Alcorn. And Bama State is at Samford. A bit better week. I guess, the game, even though it's not a conference game, the game to kind of, probably draw the most interest would be Southern at Jackson State. Regardless of how those 2 teams playing, this is a big rivalry game. So, early in the season in Jackson should be a great atmosphere. So you got a good game there. A game that, could be interesting if you're into non-conference football is Grambling and Texas A&M Commerce. That's a good non-conference opponent for Grambling. The Southern Heritage Classic should draw some attention. And then other than that, there is mainly FBS games, and Bama State and Samford should be a good one. So I would give this week a 7. Much better week than week 2 by far. Even with the 2 sub D1 games, still a great week. Not a lot of FBS games, mostly all FCS matchups, and 1 big rivalry game that week. So that's a pretty solid week. Like I said, I give it a 7. Week 4, September 21st, you have Alcorn at McNeese, Valley at Nichols, Texas Southern at Lamar, FAMU at Troy, Alabama A&M at Austin P. Central Arkansas is at Pine Bluff. Clark Atlanta is at Bethune-Cookman. Jackson State is at Grambling, and Southern is at Prairie View. Again, pretty solid week. Grambling and Jackson probably will be the game that highlights the schedule this week. Again, another big game between two teams. Two historical powers in the SWAC. Both of those teams face off. In the whole, should be interesting. Southern and Prairie View is an early SWAC West matchup. You have Austin P and Alabama A&M in the non-conference game. You got Texas Southern and Lamar, a nice regional game in the non-conference. Alcorn and McNeese. Alcorn's won 2 straight over McNeese, so that's an interesting game there. Central Arkansas, Pine Bluff, in-state opponents. Only one sub D1 game this week, and one one FBS game. So this is a good week. Again, I would mark this week as I want to say as a 8, but I'm gonna call it a 7, because even though there's a lot of FCS matchups, there aren't a lot of big matchups. So still a solid week. That Jackson and Grambling game probably highlights this week. Southern and Prairie View could be one of those games of interest as well, since it's a division game. But those are week 4. So we move on to week 5, which is September 28th. This is a SWAC week. Alabama State is at Bethune-Cookman. Alabama A&M is at Florida A&M. You got a State Fair Classic with Grambling and Prairie View in Dallas. Alcorn is at Valley, and Jackson State is at Texas Southern. First SWAC week, draw some intrigue. Not a lot of great games on this schedule right now. Grambling and Prairie View highlights this week. I would mark this as a 6. It's the first week of it's the first week of SWAC action. 10 of the 12 teams are in action. So you have some solid games, but nothing really crazy. Grambling and Prairie View probably would be the biggest game that day. Other than that, you have multiple. You have 2 East Division matchups. You have 1 West Division matchup and 2 Cross Division matchups. So that's a good first week of SWAC action. Not crazy, but it's not dull either. Now moving on to October 5th, which is week 6. You have Nicholls State at Southern. FAMU is at Alabama State. Pine Bluff is at Alcorn. Alabama A&M is playing Jackson State and Mobile. Virginia Lynchburg is at Texas Southern, and Prairie View is at Incarnate Word. This week is not that great. I think the biggest game of this week is FAMU and Alabama State. This could be a game that decides the East Division. Should be a game with a lot of eyes. So to me, that's the biggest game of the week. You have Virginia Lynchburg against Texas Southern. That's not anything really to look at. Nicholls and Southern should be interesting depending on how Southern's playing. Pine Bluff and Alcorn, those 2 teams always have crazy matchups when they play. Just something about that matchup that draws some kind of oddness. Alabama A&M and Jackson State, it could be good, it could not. But I think this is a 1 game week, so I'm gonna call it a 5, man. It's a SWAC. It's a mixed bag of games, but it's a week that's kind of carried by 1 game and not a lot of other huge games or games of super interest. Along with that 1 game, you have 2 Southland games to kind of finish it out. So I call it a 5. I could be looking at it as a 6, but I'm gonna go with a 5 on that one. Week 7 is October 12th. You have Bethune-Cookman at Alabama A&M, Alcorn at Grambling, Southern at Texas Southern, Valley at Bama State, and Prairie View at Pine Bluff. Again, this is another one of those kind of 1 game weeks, and that's Alcorn at Grambling. That's probably the biggest game of the week. Not a lot of big games this week. I'm gonna call this another 5. I don't really see a lot that draws me into it. If I'm at home and I'm not, if I'm at home, the only game I'm pulling up is Grambling and Alcorn if I can watch it. Of course, a lot of these watchability rankings depend on the TV schedule, but if you can find a stream or something, that would be the game that I would watch. Nothing else really jumps out at me this week. So again, that's another 5 week, kind of mid, not bad, but not good either. Week 8 is October 19th, and again, this week is a 2-game week, and really the one game is that the biggest game is probably going to overshadow everybody else, and that's FAMU at Jackson State. Southern and Alcorn is a big game as well. And then you have Pine Bluff and Grambling and Bethune-Cookman and Valley. Most people, if they're not going to be at a game, they're probably going to be watching FAMU JSU, because that game, regardless of what's going on the field, the off the field interest and intrigue and intensity is going to outweigh everything else. And this has been a game that people have been looking forward to since they decided not to play in the Orange Blossom Classic. So this game has been building up for weeks and weeks, and they're going to continue to build and continue to build. And just for the fact that that game's on this week, and you have Southern and Alcorn, this is even though the other 2 games aren't great, this is an 8-week just off of those 2 games. Hell, it's almost an 8-week just off of FAMU and Jackson State. The other 2 games kind of draw it down a little bit, but if there were any other decent games this week, this would be a 10-week. But I call it an 8 because those 2 games are up here and the other 2 games are kind of here. So, I think it's an 8-week. That's still a great week of football. 2 games that you really would like to watch. Week 9 is October 26th. Jackson State at Bethune-Cookman. You have the Magic City Classic in Birmingham, Alabama A&M, Alabama State. Grambling at Texas Southern, Southern at FAMU, Valley at Pine Bluff, and Texas A&M Commerce at Prairie View. This is another 2-game week, not as big as the week before, but Southern and FAMU is a game that is going to always draw some intrigue. The Magic City Classic is going to draw a lot of intrigue. So those are the 2 games this week that really stand out. The other games aren't that great. This is the first week where this is another week that has 5 SWAC games. So almost a full week of SWAC football, but not quite. I would really make this week like a 7, because the intrigue of the 2 big games aren't as huge as the previous week, but they're still nice games. And then just for the I don't know what I don't really want to curse, but just for the sheer foolery and funnery, Valley and Pine Bluff is a matchup that I would keep tabs on, but most people won't. The Texas A&M Commerce Prairie View game is always an interesting matchup when you play a Southland opponent, but that's why this week is a 7. The 2 big games aren't as big as the previous week, so that kind of draws it down a little bit. Week 10 is November 2nd. This is the first week of full SWAC action, 6 games on the schedule. You have Texas Southern at FAMU, Grambling at Bethune-Cookman, Southern at Alabama A&M, Alabama State versus Alcorn and Mobile, UAPB at Jackson State, and Prairie View is at Valley. This week is not that even though it's a full week of football in the SWAC with 6 games, there's not a lot of big games. The biggest game on the schedule to me is Alabama State and Alcorn. So I would rank this more of a 6. You have a lot of matchups that just don't really jump off the page at you. They're all East versus West. Every game this week is East versus West. So that's kind of a thing, but not a lot of games that jump off the paper at you. At least sitting here now. I mean, who knows when we get to this portion of the season? Maybe a team like Pine Bluff is playing better. Maybe Alabama A&M is playing really well, and they could be fighting for something. So right now, it doesn't really look that way, but in the future it could. But right now, this is more of a 6 ranking week. It's a 1-game week to me, and that game isn't crazy huge, but it's possible. I guess you could say Alcorn, Alabama State could be a preview of the SWAC championship, depending on who you ask at this point. So that could be a big game. but that's the game that's carrying that week. Week 11 is November 9th. Yeah, Bethune-Cookman at Southern, Alabama A&M at Pine Bluff, Bama State at Grambling, FAMU at Prairie View, Valley at Jackson, and Texas Southern at Alcorn. This to me is probably another 2-game week. Neither game is super big, but depending on how things go coming out of the spring and into the summer, either one of these games could be a preview of the SWAC championship game. You have all Alabama State and Grambling could be a possible. I'm not gonna say it is. I'm not gonna say it is, but it's always possible. FAMU and Prairie View probably could be another rematch in the SWAC championship. So those 2 games are big games. Um, Jackson State and Valley, it's a big game for Valley. Alcorn and TSU's been an interesting game the last couple of weeks, last couple of seasons. So maybe that's a game that you keep your eyes out on. But other than that, it's not a lot. Not a lot there. Um, so I rank this more of a 6-week again. Um, the 2 big games aren't big enough to sway me, and the other games just aren't that great. Week 12 is November 16th. Yeah, Bethune-Cookman at Texas Southern, Grambling at Alabama State, Pine Bluff at Southern, Alcorn at Prairie View, Jackson State at Bama State, and Valley at Florida A&M. The Jackson Bama State game is going to be big. On the field and off the field, the intrigue between the 2 fan bases is big. This game could decide the East Division, so that's a big game. Alcorn and Prairie View again could decide the West. So I would mark this as a 7-week. Those 2 games could really impact the season. So you definitely want to watch those 2 games. If those are the 2 games. If I had to pick one, those are the 2 to look at. And then other than that, there's not a lot there. But those 2 games carry this week to a large degree. November 23rd is week 13, and we have 5 games that week. All conference games. You have Florida A&M at Bethune-Cookman. That's the Florida Classic. Valley hosting Alabama A&M, Jackson at Alcorn, Prairie View at Alabama State, and Pine Bluff at Texas Southern at Pine Bluff. That Prairie View Bama State game could be a big game, could be a preview of the SWAC championship game. Alcorn Jackson again, same thing, but that game is big regardless. So that's a good game. The Florida Classic is always a big game, regardless of what the records are. So this is a strong week. This is a 8-week, because these are 3 very strong games. If there was one other good game, I could make this a 9-week, but this is an 8-week, a really good week to close out the majority of the SWAC schedule. Valley and Alabama and them have, they split their last two meetings. So Valley beat them in Itabena 2 years ago. So it's not a foregone conclusion. This could be a game that gets a coach fired. If they lose to Valley, if that hasn't happened already. So that could be something to look at. Texas Southern and Pine Bluff had a really crazy game last season. So all of these games have something there. But this is a week that those 3 games are huge. And they all impact the SWAC championship race some kind of way. So I think that this is a really strong week to close out the majority of the season. Of course, there's one other week of football after that. And that's week 14. You have Tuskegee at Alabama State in the Turkey Day Classic. That's on Thursday, November 28th. That's Thanksgiving. And the Bayou Classic on Saturday, November 30th. Southern and Grambling in New Orleans. Since those are 2 big games, I really call this is another 8-week. Southern and Grambling, depending on how these teams do, could impact the West Division, or it could not mean anything. But of course, Tuskegee and Bama State is a big rivalry game, and those are the only 2 games on either day. So the fact that that's the only football you have over the Thanksgiving weekend, that makes that a big weekend to watch football. So I would mark it as an 8. And then the SWAC championship game is December 7th. That's a 10. I mean, regardless of who's playing right now, that's a 10 because this is the last regular season game. This is the last game. This is for the SWAC championship. So I think that when you look at it that way, it's for all the marbles. It could be a rematch. It could not be, but it could. It's gonna be an interesting game no matter what, and depending on where the game is, it could make it even more of a big game. So just the fact that it's a SWAC championship game is automatically a 10 to me. Now, once the game is settled and the teams are settled, who knows, how I might view it. But right now, I look at it as a pretty strong game just because it's the SWAC championship game and it's the final game of the regular season. And the Celebration Bowl is a 10 as well um, for the HBCU National Championship. So that's pretty much how this thing goes. So I want to thank y'all for hanging out with me while we do this. And like I said, we'll be back tomorrow to the recap the Grambling spring game and the Bethune-Cookman spring game. And that's gonna do it for us. So we'll catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.